Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Ask an Expert, Effectively Selling to Purchasing Personnel, brought to you by the Canadian Professional Sales Association and the Supply Chain Management Association. Today, we'll hear from our esteemed panel, moderator Martin Boucher, VP of Sales at the CPSA, Hubert Lachance, SCMP, and Chris Hann, Regional Category Manager of HVAC at Ontario and Atlantic at Wolseley Canada Inc. Today, they will seek to answer the 7 key questions when selling to purchasing personnel. Please note that you've been placed on mute for the duration of the webinar and that you may ask questions during the Q&A session using the Ask Question function in your GoToWebinar dashboard. As mentioned, moderating today's webinar is CPSA's VP of Sales, Martin Boucher. Martin is responsible for leading the organization's sales strategy and execution and to help shape the direction of the product roadmap, client services, operational efficiencies, and business partnerships. Throughout an extensive career with Ricoh, a Fortune 500 company, he has held many leadership positions and has managed sales and operations teams to success both at home and in international markets. Martin has developed a long track record of strategic business development, team leadership, client relationship management, and business transformation. Martin holds a Bachelor of Commerce degree from McGill University. Now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Martin to introduce our panelists and to start.
Thank you, Ruplin. Good morning, everyone. Let me introduce you our panelists here. We have Hubert Lachance, who's an SCMP, and Hubert works for Université de Montréal as a buyer. Hubert has worked for over 10 years for a well-known multinational CPG company before transitioning to public procurement for Ville de Montréal. Hubert obtained an MBA in International Business in 2004 and a BAA in 2002 from Laval University in Quebec. In 2016, Hubert was awarded an Excelsior Award for his contribution through his book called Confessions of a Professional Buyer: The Secrets About Selling and Purchasing Service. This book is a mandatory reading for professional selling class at San Diego State University and has helped many newcomers to procurement. Welcome, Hubert.
Thanks.
And we also have Chris Hann, who is the Regional Category Manager, HVAC Ontario and Atlantic. Chris is an experienced regional sales manager with more than 24 years of experience in the HVAC sales and category management field. And he has demonstrated a history of working in the wholesale industry for many, many years. He started out in the warehouse and he worked all the way up to the ranks that he holds today. Good morning, Chris, and thanks for joining.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Good. So we'll start with our first question. Gentlemen, what are the key differences a sales professional should take note of when selling specifically to purchasing personnel versus other prospects? I guess we'll start with you, Hubert.
Okay, so let's begin with purchasing personnel. Purchasing personnel, they buy on behalf of an internal client, not for themselves. This has many implications that we are going to cover. They have to follow a sourcing policy that generally has a sourcing limit. Therefore, buyers need to run tenders for purchases over a certain threshold. This can explain why buyers usually show less enthusiasm than budget holders toward business proposals. They make rational decisions based on the information they can gather, so they are less likely to value intangible or untold added value. They can be your best and only ally to acquire new business. We all know that acquiring new customer is difficult, especially when a customer is already well served. Purchasers working for private companies have saving objectives, whereas internal clients may not care about savings, but they would still expect fair pricing. The level of purchasers' influence vary greatly between organizations and purchasing categories. I mean, IT, marketing, finance. For example, purchasers are only involved 50% of the time with marketing categories. Other prospects, well, in my experience, they are less interested in comparing solution and prices than purchasers need to do. Their mission is not to justify purchasing decisions, but to address an issue or a need effectively. They generally do not see the need to tender everything. They prefer to purchase the tried and true. And relationship with salespeople can influence purchasing decisions, especially when selling services. This is quite positive for existing customer, but a challenge when prospecting new clients. My book, Confessions of a Professional Buyer, that is available on Amazon, explains in great details how to compete with.
Well, thank you, Hubert. Chris, do you agree with us?
Oh, absolutely. I think supply chain and purchasing isn't a cut and dried thing, and there's a lot of variables. So yeah, no, I absolutely do agree with a lot of what Hubert is saying for sure. Yep.
And Chris, how do you separate purchasing personnel from other prospects in your sales activities?
Well, I mean, if I look at it in terms of the HVACR trade, or even in the skills trade, when you're dealing with contractor network, it's very important. There are a myriad of people internally that do purchasing, and when I say that, our salespeople and salespeople in general quite often misidentify who they're selling to, and it's very tricky. So when I say purchasing personnel, it could mean a couple of different things. Owner operators have the ability to purchase internally, and they may be purchasing on behalf of the company, or he may be looking at efficiency savings or pricing. That's, owners are absolutely looking at that. Service managers have purchasing ability, and what they do is they're purchasing products to fit a specific need, and a lot of times they're basing their decisions on availability right away to get something done and off the books, so their people can move on to another project. You've got dedicated purchasing agents internally, where they're purchasing off of supply chain software that's calculating demand and inventory requirements. So it's more of a cut and dried thing than it is a benefits and features thing or a time saving thing. They're looking at what needs to come into the building in order to service the business coming in. You've got warehouse and shop managers that buy commodity-based items that their crews can pick up on a day-to-day basis to make sure that their jobs get done. So it's very important that our salespeople do the homework before they go in to sell to these people, because everybody has a different outlook on why they need to buy the product and how they need to buy the product. So it's a subtle nuance, but it's very, very important that salespeople pick that up.
Thank you, Chris. Let's move on to our second question, and it's going to help narrow it down to really the purchasing professionals. So I'll start with Hubert. What mistakes do sales professionals make when positioning their product or service to purchasing personnel?
Okay, I start with this one. Not taking advantage of both the purchaser and the internal client during meetings. So sales professionals sometimes ask for meetings to introduce their product or services. It is important that they ask if other internal clients should also attend. This will ensure that the focus is not only on cost, but on how well a company may service a client and offer an opportunity to understand what really matters in the purchasing decision. Also, assuming that the purchaser understands what is being bought. Some buyers are interested and curious and have experience, whereas others have less knowledge or experience. It is important not to assume that the purchaser is an expert, so spending time explaining how the product service works, what are the cost drivers, industry insight, how other clients have conducted sourcing is all useful info and will help build trust. Also, another mistake is not taking advantage of procurement. Buyers need to introduce new suppliers to the organization in order to achieve their objectives, like saving and adding value to the business. And introducing a new supplier is a challenge, even for procurement. So whenever you have a chance to meet with a buyer, ask questions on what matters most to their internal clients, learn the customer company's culture, and this info will serve later on during tender process. Why? Because it's impossible to write down everything that an internal client requires. So all this extra knowledge will allow you to get the small details that could make the difference. And also another mistake I've seen often is that when participating in a tender process, sales professionals usually respond to what is being asked and does not challenge much, even when the scope is not great or does not even make sense. It is important to highlight potential issues when you respond to a tender and make recommendations during the time that is allowed, the Q&A process. And being proactive during this phase will definitely leave a good impression and avoid surprises and potential issues. And suppliers should not hesitate to ask for more times if they needed to answer a tender.
Okay, thank you, Hubert. And Chris, I'd like to hear your perspective on this. What have you noticed works best when positioning your product or service with the purchasing personnel?
Yeah, we've kind of changed our focus in our side of the business, particularly in Wolseley. In our segment in the HVACR field, we've got a lot of tenured employees that when they go into a sales call, it is all about what they want to sell the customer. And that has vastly changed over the years. We've now kind of switched our focus to solution selling. We know that is key. We have to take into consideration that in our industry, our product offering in terms of competitive wholesale isn't unique. Most manufacturers pretty much make the same things with subtle differences and features. Where we key in on now is the benefits. They may vary, which, it may be very important to a customer. We focus in on those, teach the customers about that and how that can better help his business and how it operates. It could be as simple as identifying some time savings or product rationalization within their own business. We also talk about added value. We position ourselves very well in that respect as a company, I feel. We offer a strong online presence nowadays, which is, the business transaction B2B is growing. We have several trained segment experts that provide technical assistance to our customers as after sales support. There's another added value that not a lot of other wholesale groups can kind of offer to their customer base. It's peace of mind for the customer once you're in and they've installed product or equipment and may need some help afterwards rather than going to the manufacturer. We can be the key contact point. These type of things, it's really been a differentiator for us.
Interesting, thank you. And just to show the flip side of things, what has proven not to work? What has not been working in the approach that you have to change?
Well, a couple things. With giving all this added value features to our customer base, there's a cost associated to that. So selling strictly on price is something that we don't often do much anymore. We kind of know what the business and we know what we bring to the table is worth. So we're not afraid to ask for extra because of that. There's always going to be another customer or another competitor in the market that will always beat you on price. And sometimes it's just a race to the bottom. So what we try and do is try and measure the value, institute it in the pricing. And quite frankly, if I was to take a very conservative guess, there still are about 5 to 10% of our customer base that will only deal on a price. And things are changing. Business owners realize that, it can't be just about a price anymore. It's got to be about some service as well.
Okay, thanks for that. We'll move on now to our third question, which is, what misconceptions do sales professionals have when selling to purchasing personnel? Obviously, we're going to start with Hubert on that one. Hubert.
Thanks. Okay, I would start with this one. Not understanding that procurement has to follow a sourcing process, thus running tenders. It's not because they don't like you or don't value your service. It's a company requirement. Also, believing that the purchaser is mainly interested in purchasing the solution you are presenting. In fact, due to their role, they need to compare solution products to justify purchasing decisions. And also, procurement influence over sourcing decision is constantly changing. Buyers are generally extremely involved when sourcing goods and becoming more and more involved when sourcing services. Do not take your customers for granted. Procurement influence and/or employee turnover are likely to change the selling dynamic. Also, your current or potential customer may not really know what they buy. As a result, it is difficult to acquire new clients. Some large companies do not have good system in place and the discipline to capture historical sourcing data. Good examples are maintenance expenses for overhead cranes and fire safety equipment. HVAC would also qualify. So there are so many parts with different codes that are often not captured that it becomes difficult, if not impossible, to forecast purchases without a proper structure.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Hubert. And Chris, what have you learned from experience in terms of when comes the time to selling to purchasing personnel?
Well, I think just over the years, what I've learned is we're still in a relationship business. A lot of businesses are still relationship businesses, as much as we'd like to think that they're not. With that being said, that you become a partner in your customer's business. It doesn't matter what position they hold, whether it's, again, purchasing personnel, an owner, a shop manager, an engineer on staff. They must find value in the service you provide them and trust that you always act in their interest, especially when the outcome isn't what they want or expect. Always tell them the truth. Don't ever overpromise something, because time is money for them and mistakes cost the customer money. They might not always like what you have to say, but it's always going to be truthful. And that builds that kind of a relationship, like you were a partner in their own business.
And Chris, like you've been in sales for many years, so are there any misconceptions that you had once upon a time to purchasers?
Yeah, just to further kind of build on a couple of Hubert's points, some sales associates think that traditional purchasing people are just pushed through POs and don't really have a grasp on how that piece of equipment or piece of parts or whatever that is works and how it fits into the systems. They really have no interest in an overall solution, which, I actually learned that pretty quickly into the process because I was told so. And they're not just product centric and they are solutions oriented. We don't ever go into a call with a pure purchasing personnel with that kind of mindset. And we learn it over time, obviously.
Thank you. We'll move on to question number 4, everyone. Question number 4 is directed at Hubert. What should sales professionals know about the purchasing department KPIs or target indicators or key performance indicators to help position the value of their product or service?
Okay, well, I'm not aware of KPIs related with product positioning. However, what I have seen is that companies rely on traditional KPIs like on time and in full with proper quality and obviously savings. In terms of KPIs related with purchasing services, they mainly apply to strategic suppliers and are oriented toward maximizing value through performance reviews. Some companies will have targets to complete a set number of reviews with existing suppliers like every year. This process is quite new, so companies are starting to doing it most often. But the supplier can often help the buyer to identify what to measure, because services are so custom that you need some input and collaboration. And what is great about supplier performance reviews is that it helps both partners work better together. Like when there's an issue, it's often caused by the client, but it's just a lack of communication. So these reviews really help to strengthen relationship and allow to move forward even if they are bigger issues.
Okay, thank you. And Chris, what do you wish you knew about the purchasing department's KPIs or targets when you tried to position your value?
Yeah, to kind of mirror a little bit what Hubert's saying, on time and full is a huge thing now. We measure that internally with our vendors bringing stuff into our network, and our customers are now measuring it with us delivering product to job sites or to jobs. because we have a lot of rather large customers that have projects that span over 12, 24 months, and to make sure that everything's on time scheduled saves them money and makes sure that the job is done at projection. Now, over the years, we've not done a great job in terms of lead time forecasting and scheduling. We've also not done a great job of having the right kind of delivery model in place to get that product to the job sites on time or properly. We've run into a situation where we haven't managed that very well, and consequently either sat on product internally for too long, which we now have surplus inventory or inventory in excess of X amount of days, which hits the books. So I wish we had a better tracking mechanism early on internally to help manage jobs like that, because we're talking about millions and millions of dollars kind of sitting around and not being utilized to its full advantage.
Okay, thanks for that. We'll move on to our next question, everyone. Question number 5 out of our top 7 questions. What are the best ways to nurture a strong relationship with purchasing procurement personnel? Hubert?
Okay, so I would say to support the need definition phase instead of asking for a budget. So this shows that the supplier is not trying to take advantage of a customer, but rather working on supplying what is required and finding the right solution. Provide detailed cost breakdown. It shows transparency. Suggest options at different prices. So if you have different priced product, you should provide the info. Otherwise, the customer will have to shop around, and they may think that there's a cheaper solution elsewhere. Make sure that understanding your quotation is a no-brainer. I've seen quotation that numbers were not added. What was option was not clear. So it's important, because if a mistake is made, too bad. Also remain fair when changes occur. So if a customer asks for something different, it doesn't mean that cost is automatically up. Also, when it applies, communicate termination penalties well in advance. So this will avoid a lot of unpleasant discussion, and the customer will be more careful when placing a request. Also, when prospecting new clients, communicate that it's always a pleasure to provide a quotation. Do not be frustrated if you're not selected. Just keep going, and eventually you should get a chance. Also, suggest a remuneration model, a volume discount agreement, or find a solution so that procurement doesn't have to tender everything. If you have sort of an agreement that can cover many purchases, this will allow purchasers to justify why they go directly to you without necessarily tendering every time. Try to accommodate customer asking for better price, and think of other ways to reduce cost. Also, advertise any discount in the invoice. It should be clear when the customer has a special discount. So do not hesitate to communicate and demonstrate the partnership. Support buyers in calculating saving. It's important for them, so they may need your help to do some data extraction and find what is the impact of agreeing to a new deal or agreement. Visit customers whenever you have the chance. Get seen. Instead of using the phone, make sure that you are aware if people are leaving the company. Ask questions so you always know whom to contact, and that your customers think about you when it's time. Be organized. If you can answer the phone right away, the buyers and internal customers really appreciate. And whenever a customer asks for modifications, you have to lay out the impact, because suppliers often feel that they must say yes to everything, but they get into trouble. And the purchaser will also be in trouble if the supplier cannot deliver. So it's important that you teach your customer your lead time and your constraints. That's it for me.
Wow, lots of great tips there. A lot of good information here. Well, thank you for this. Let's move on now to question number 6. How can sales professionals go above and beyond to add value for purchasing personnel? What can we do to add this value to make it very tangible for you?
Well, we all know that saving is important. Unfortunately, this is the main thing with procurement. So proactively suggest saving opportunities when you have a chance. I had an example where we were looking for a magnet for stores, and a supplier recommended using removable stickers. So, I mean, it cost a fraction, and it was great. You know, we could report a saving. Also, if you're in a position where you buy stuff on behalf of your customer and you have negotiated a great deal that benefits your customer, you have to inform the buyers. Otherwise, you won't know. Process optimization is key. So inquire about your internal customers' processes to assess what could be done to help them. I had an example where we had to complete tax information whenever we ran a contest, and the supplier decided to take this job for us. And obviously, we called this guy next time. Inform customers of internal constraints. I mean, you can invite buyers or internal customers to visit your factory if you have one, show them the process, how long it takes to make different steps. So it's going to teach them a bit more about your product service, help build relationship, and also will help your customer plan better. Help your customer taking administrative tasks. I mean, I provided an example earlier, but in another example, we had a supplier that was storing gift cards at his place. So that was a really added value, because if you have contests made for different departments, I mean, these gift cards get lost. So a supplier was able to keep them for us. And also a big thing is to clarify roles and responsibilities. Whenever you read an RFP or you meet with customers for performance reviews or discussions, make sure it's clear who does what. And sometimes the client doesn't even know. So insist on that, and it's going to help.
Thank you for that. Chris, now your side, I'm curious as to what actions, what kind of a game plan, what approach have you found to be useful or successful in going above and beyond, where it meant something important to the purchasing personnel?
Yeah, in my experience over the years, flexibility and availability to that purchasing personnel, whoever it may be, owner, operator, service manager, whomever, during maybe off-peak hours or being available when typically your competition may not be, has been a pretty big thing for us. Again, like I say, purchasing personnel in my field can be a contractor, and he could be on a job site at 9 o'clock at night in the middle of winter with a no heat call, and in need of some assistance in sourcing a part or whatever it may be. We identified that a number of years back, and internally put in a regional call center. It sits in our regional head office in Burlington. There's about 16 call center workers that we flex on and off part-time. So what it is we're open from 5:30 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night, Monday to Friday, and then open, I think, till 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock on Saturday, Sunday. And what that is an emergency line where that contractor can call in and say, hey, I've got such and such a model of furnace. I need a part for this. Our people can source it, find out where he is in the province, suggest a local branch by looking at their inventory and say, yes, they have that. Give the contact name, a number of the branch manager for that branch, and they contact the branch manager who goes in and opens up after hours to kind of give him that part to get the person up in the middle of winter with some heat. So, it's added value. It's huge added value. It's not obviously not a free service. There's a cost associated to it, but at this point, you're providing an over and above service that contractor and that homeowner, that end user does appreciate. They'll never talk about price in terms of paying for something like that. So we found that is the over and above, one of the over and aboves we've used that's worked out very, very well for us.
Thanks. And Chris, what, those were good examples. I'm curious as to what, if you had to pick, one action, something that you would do above and beyond to deliver value, what would it be?
So, I mean, it's a real simple thing for me as a sales professional talking to purchasing personnel or whomever, is listening and asking questions. A lot of listening and asking the right questions may uncover certain avenues and solutions for that customer that wasn't thought of previously. It may have them think in a different mindset. They may learn something. You may uncover that, there's some value internally in their organization that they're not leveraging that they can leverage now. Sometimes the solution isn't anything you can provide in your normal course of business. It may be something that you suggest that helps them with their AP system or security or garbage pickup just by leveraging some of the stuff that you do internally with your own company. So there's sometimes it's pointing them in the right direction. It's not necessarily selling them a piece of product. There's solutions-based stuff that we can provide them just by listening and making recommendations.
Thank you, Chris. And then we're going to move on to the final question that we received from the audience. And the question was, why is a company satisfaction rating or net promoter score, there's different variables, different techniques, methodologies. Why is that important to a purchasing manager? And why, as a purchasing professional, is this score important to you? And if I were to unpack this a tiny bit, Hubert, I would say, maybe how important is the level of other customers' satisfaction to you as a purchasing professional?
Well, references are important, and sometimes existing customers are being called to pre-qualify suppliers for tender opportunity. Most often, a referral will be contacted prior to awarding a contract in order to reassure the budget holder and the internal client that the supplier is able to deliver. But I would say satisfied customer has much less impact when selling to a public organization. For example, in Quebec, negative feedback from outside organization cannot be used to disqualify a supplier. And in that sense, the context today was more selling to private companies, but I would also state that selling to public organization is highly recommended because the process is extremely fair and well managed in my opinion. So I would invite salespeople to also look at public tender. And for example, in Ontario, you are allowed to bid on public contract in Quebec. So I would definitely suggest taking a look at this.
Okay, well, thank you. So I guess knowing satisfaction of other organizations does add value to your decision-making process as a purchaser. Good. So Chris, from your perspective, is it something, a measurement of satisfaction, something that purchasing personnel has asked for during your career, or is it something new? Or?
Yeah, not until very recently in our industry have we heard of NPS and satisfaction scoring. We've only started hearing about that within the last maybe 12 to 18 months. However, as an organization, we've found that it's very important, and we put a lot of focus on that. So to put it in perspective, we've hired only a department of 3 at our corporate office that actually heads up NPS scoring and satisfaction rating, and actually sends out surveys to our customers, or provides a platform for them to provide feedback for us on NPS, so that we can kind of measure ourselves in terms of how we stand in the same market space as our competitors. We've been able to rectify a lot of stuff that's gone wrong by quickly reacting to a negative NPS score, and having our branch managers or local people reach out to that customer within hours of his experience and provide solutions to his problem. We've actually got a lot of feedback. We've got some testimonials that we play at some of our national meetings that because of these surveys and because we've reacted so quickly on the NPS, it's strengthened their relationship with us and them wanting to deal with us on a day-to-day basis. So it does build a lot of confidence, especially when you react to a negative situation very quickly. And this is what this does, the NPS scoring. It helps in that respect.
Well, thank you for this. Now, Rupin, I guess we're opening up to questions that were submitted during this webinar.
Yes, so audience, please take note. The question and answer session is now open, and you can send any questions you may have on the webinar through the question function in your GoToWebinar dashboard. We do have a couple here. Is it a value that they buy from an ISO certified company? I think Hubert, that question could be for you.
If there are value for ISO companies?
Correct.
Honestly, I mean, I've worked for a CPG company, and it's not something that we have looked at. I know in public procurement for IT projects over, I think, $500,000, there's a ISO certification required. But in my experience, it's not really important from what I've seen in the kind of stuff I used to buy.
Thank you for that, Hubert. We have a next one here. When the sales staff is trying to push their product or service, is it necessary for procurement personnel to use the code of ethics?
It is heavily governed in our organization. In fact, it's part of our the way we conduct ourselves day to day that yes, there's a code of ethics. It is strictly adhered to. And yes, we beat that into our sales managers' minds when talking to our customers. We take it very seriously because we're a publicly traded corporation. We have to. And even I would say that even if you're a private organization, I think that in order to maintain the reputation of the industry that you're in, I think it's very important that they do adhere to their code of ethics, especially when it is selling to your customer base.
Well, on my end, I would say that, of course, it's important, and there are stuff you just don't do. Like, for example, if you're in a tender process, you don't invite anyone for lunch, during that time. Obviously, once the process is done, some companies will allow it. I mean, it differs a lot from every organization, what is acceptable and not acceptable. What I found most surprising is that it's always kind of on the lookout if it's procurement, but internal customers are the one being invited more often and are the one influencing more. But I would say if you have any doubt, just ask what is allowed or not, and they will tell you because it's different for each organization, but there's common sense. And so it's better to be careful because if you don't act properly, which has happened to me in my career, some suppliers, then you just push them away because you don't trust them.
Perfect. Here's a good one. How would you like procurement people to approach sales in regards to a contract dispute?
I'll let Hubert. It's more about purchasing, kind of approaching sales. So I'll let Hubert answer that, and then I can give it from a sales perspective for sure.
Contract dispute, it also depends on the company. If your company has a lot of money, sometimes they will accept losing money and they won't make a big deal out of it. But obviously, what is important is that the supplier does everything that is possible and tells you the truth. I had one case where we had to cancel an order and we lost some money, but the supplier never told us, hey, I recommend you cancel. They try to gain time, but when we decided to cancel the order, then they say, yes, that was the right thing to do. So, I mean, just do your best to fix the issue as best as you can. Be honest, and I mean, if you're able to absorb the issue, I mean, sometimes it's recommended because some internal clients, they will never forget, if something goes wrong. So I would say if you're able to fix it if you want to keep the customer.
Chris, do you have any insight on that one?
Yeah, I mean, from a sales perspective, to Hubert's point, I mean, if you were upfront and honest, and there are some mitigating circumstances that you couldn't control, either on the customer side or on your side, typically what will happen is on the sales side, if we're not talking about a large amount, then we will usually absorb that. If we're talking about a shared mistake, then we will usually go back and try and find a solution where it's amicable for both parties and say, look, we're willing to take 75% of the cost hit. Are you willing to take 25% of the cost hit? And if you have the relationship and you've built that relationship with that party, then typically it's okay. Very rarely do we find that we come to a conclusion where your customer is unwilling to do business with you moving forward. Now, if I'm looking at it from wholesale distributor to manufacturer or vendor we purchase from, I would say that, and there may be some on the call, I would say that we try and carry a big stick because we're a large corporation, and we try and recoup as much as we can. However, we also try and be fair. It comes back to our code of conduct and code of ethics. We also have to be truthful and deal with ourselves with integrity. So that's maybe a little bit different when it comes to manufacturer to wholesale distribution.
Thank you for that, Chris. This is more of almost a professional question, but any suggestions for a person who is from a BPO background and switching to supply chain professional after doing a postgraduate in supply chain management?
I mean, you're asking like recommendations to enter the career? Is it what the question is?
Any suggestions they're looking for? It's interesting.
But me, with a bit of retrospective, I think the public sector is a great place to work. The important is just to put your feet in the. I mean, I used to work at City of Montreal, and it was fantastic, all the job opportunities. So if you enter a huge organization like a city, I mean, at least in Montreal, there are so many opportunities that you could end up doing supply chain stuff. There are a lot of jobs right now in procurement. It's incredible the number of jobs you can see on the market. So they don't really look at your background if you have a degree in purchasing, because honestly, what you learn for procurement is so different from one company to another, what they do, that they can hire people that don't have purchasing background. But the idea is to start from the basis. At the beginning, you will do issue purchase order or a stock management. This is like a forecasting. This is stuff that not too many people want to do. So it's just to try to put your feet in a place where there are many opportunities, so eventually you can move to where you want.
Thank you for answering that. So we've got a next one. For new prospective buyers and customers, are there best practices to use to get past the preliminary gatekeepers and gain access to key decision makers?
This is extremely hard, because let's say I'm as a buyer, let's say for a multinational, if there's a really small supplier that doesn't have a lot of capacity, they won't even be considered. So it's not a matter of relationship, it's a matter of capacity. It's hard to get a new customer, is extremely hard. If you know people in the organization, it helps. I would suggest try to book a meeting with a purchasing personnel. Try to get a meeting with the right buyer. Ask who's in charge of buying this type of stuff. If you don't succeed, then try to contact the internal client to introduce your product or service. But you have to make sure that you have the right capacity to serve the customers. And if it's the case, then you need to make some steps to meet that person. One time I had a supplier coming with a DVD with some balloon, They left that in the office. We checked the video, and they were doing a big event. So yes, we met with the company, and we ended up working with this company. Not just because it was original, but they had capacities that the others didn't have. They were the one who got subcontracted by our own suppliers. They were the one doing the jobs, but we were not aware. So, I mean, you have some time to be original, but it takes some efforts. But if you read my book, there's 6 hours about, it's a 6 hours reading, and I give a lot of clues on how to do that.
Hubert, I think you may receive a lot of balloons after this webinar.
And Chris, did you want to weigh in on that at all for any best practices?
Yeah, just to mirror one of Hubert's points, I mean, trying to leverage an internal relationship that you already have is usually preferable. Maybe even a relationship that another person in an external organization may also have with that. One of the people internally is also preferable. Again, it's very hard. You're right. It's very hard to sway new customers. If you have a very unique added value proposition, if there's something there that crosses over on a lot of businesses, like that does help. Like having in our industry, having a strong online back to front B2B presence really helps, because it's not a lot of people in your market space, or not a lot of competitive companies in your market space has that. So that I mean, we've been able to leverage something like that. So pick out something key that you know that you can offer that maybe your competition cannot. But outside of that, yeah, it is very, very hard. Persistence, some people love persistence. There are some people that the no give up attitude means that you are someone that can value their business if you're willing to give it to them. So I think that, I mean, not to the point of being, stalkerish, but to the point of saying, look, I'm really interested in your business, and also leverage your people, your internal people. That's your best asset. I mean, that's what I find for our company. Your people are always your best asset, provided you've hired the right ones. But, leverage your special people internally that that business could really, really rely on. And that also may open a door for you as well.
Thank you, Chris. We'll take a couple more. We have time for a couple more here. What is the top concern for purchasing when switching to a new supplier?
Okay, this one is, it's really that, because the internal client, okay, usually they are used to receiving a service, but they don't care how it's done. So if they're not used to hiring a lot of suppliers, if they deal often with the same suppliers, the biggest challenge is to understand what they want, how they want the service to be done. So internal clients are often reluctant to change, because they say, oh, I will not get this or that, or I'm going to have to teach the supplier what to do. I think the biggest concern here, that is concern for procurement too, is to get the information from the budget holder. So you need to ask them a lot of questions, see example of what they buy, ask about their internal process. So when it's time to make a proposal, you're able to highlight the context of that company. The internal client must feel that it's going to be extreme to switch. And this is where it's hard, because especially with services, it's really to understand the expectations that are often not even written down. So that's where you can partner with procurement and ask a lot of questions to procurement to make sure that you offer something relevant.
Chris, do you share the same feelings? Do you have any key concerns that you've experienced from purchasing?
So when we look at maybe switching, and I'm going to speak from a wholesale distributor talking to or looking at moving away from a vendor into another vendor. So here's some of the key things that we look at. What is their current distribution model in your market space? How many competitors do they currently supply to? Where are where's the availability of product? Does it come out of the US? Does it come out of Canada? Are they an innovative company? Are they known for bringing new products to the market that their competition doesn't typically make, or things like that? We look at it that way. Their breadth of product. Do they cover enough for you to move away from your supplier that you're currently buying product from? What's their market share like? Are they a company that only has 2 or 3% market share in your area, a limited breadth of products, they don't innovate very much? Those are all key contributors to say, hey, maybe it's not a company or a vendor that I need to partner with. And finally, are they stable? Is it a stable company? Do they show a track record of having the same people in their business, running the business? Their stock prices, are they sustainable? A stable company really kind of paints a picture as to who you're partnering with. So we look at it from that perspective in terms of looking at vendors.
That's great. And on persistence there, what do you recommend when a salesperson tries over a length of time to get an appointment and wants to keep trying but doesn't want to alienate the buyer?
Yeah, that's a tough one. There's a time when to say it's enough, obviously, because if I look at it from a sales management perspective, is it a wise ROTI, or return on time invested if you're always going into that customer once or twice a week in order to try and get an appointment? So after a certain time frame, yeah, you just have to kind of back away and say, look, they know that I'm here. My competitor will probably stumble at some point, and hopefully they will reference the 3 million business cards I've left over the last 4 or 5 months. So I mean, there is a kind of a time when to say enough's enough, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would say usually the buyer should know quite fast if you're suitable for their company. If a supplier doesn't have the capacity or the credibility, it's going to be very hard. So if you're in that category, maybe you should looking for other type of customers. If really you still believe that you should meet with procurement, first step is to try to meet with them. If you have absolutely no success, and it's not like you're going to burn anything, you don't have anything, then try to contact a budget holder, see if there's interest. But it's all a matter of judgment and also timing sometimes. So don't hesitate to ask, is there a better timing, or when do you plan to make your next purchase? Do we have any chance? Or you can also offer a good way to meet with a buyer is to explain give a market insight. So like a teaching 101 course on X, usually buyers could be interested to learn more about a category or an industry. So if you have that kind of knowledge or people that can come with you, you could try that.
Perfect. I think we've got one more question. I'd like to know what position a sales professional should take if a buyer has asked for a bid but refuses to give the details of the scope of work. If they're looking to collect general packages or quotes from various vendors, why do buyers do this without providing clear details as to what they're looking for? How do we best position ourselves the best way in situations like this? It's a good question for you, Hubert.
Well, I had a case where we wanted to buy custom boxes to put premium products. We briefed suppliers verbally. We provided a written document. But did we use the written document? What is important is sometimes the internal customer doesn't exactly know what they want, so they want a proposition. So try to listen. If your customer says we want something for a premium brand, something expensive, come up with an expensive solution. Try to grasp whatever you have in terms of information. it does happen that the scope is not clear. I mean, if you feel it's not a real quotation, maybe don't participate. But if you feel it's just a lack of information because they don't know how to communicate, maybe try some options, different options, and see how it goes. Not an easy question.
Any experience in that, Chris?
Yeah, we get a lot of bids and job quotes that or RFQs that come to us that you're right, there's a lot of incomplete information. And if you have the right people, we have a regional quotations department that live and breathe this on a daily basis. So they know the right questions to ask. So if they see gaps within the proposal, then they know what to go back and ask. So you really, I mean, the long and the short of it is having the right trained personnel internally does absolutely help you push past that. So, don't be afraid to ask the right questions. Don't be afraid to provide as many options as possible if they can't give you any more information that's given. Because it's not going to hurt you to provide as many options as possible. It just gives them a larger basket of goods to pick from in order to kind of provide the right solution for them. So, I mean, that's only the thing I can say about that.
But sometimes the process is run poorly and will not end in anything. Unfortunately, it does happen too.
Thank you so much. I think that's about time for our question and answer session. Thanks so much for everybody who participated. On behalf of the Canadian Professional Sales Association, thank you so much to the SCMA, of course, and to our panelists, Chris Hann and Hubert Lachance. Thank you so much for taking part in today's webinar, and of course to our audience for attending today. If you'd like a recording of the webinar, it will be available in the CPSA Learning Hub. And if you have any questions at all about this webinar, please feel free to email me at salessuccess@cpsa.com. And I'd like to thank everybody again and wish everyone a fabulous day. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.